And for those of you who have read the first chapter, enjoy it again. Chapter 1. Excuse me. Unplugged dog dreams. Okay then, here we go. Where to start? How about the premise? Sounds good to me. So, this entire book is based on 3 main concepts. These 3 concepts, let's call them the big 3 for short, are, for all practical purposes, the basis for our psychological reality. Well, actually, our perceived reality on any level. It's quite limiting to say it's only our psychological reality because I believe everything is related. One cannot separate the physical from the non-physical, nor the psychological from the spiritual. It would be like trying to flip only one side of a coin. If you're gonna flip one, then both sides must go for the ride. I believe there is no separation between our realities. Distinct differences, but no separation. So although much of this book will relate to scientific and or psychological data, I believe one will easily find the underlying spiritual current. At other times, I believe the spiritual current will be quite evident. So, it is in this chapter that one possible explanation as to why we are the way we are shall be revealed. The information I will share with you will stay with you for life. Once it's revealed, I believe it will assist you in remembering everything you'll need to remember in order to remember or pull all the parts together of yourself in order to affect your life in the way that you deem necessary. This way, you may fulfill yourself in your dreams to any degree that you wish. Excuse me. After you read this chapter, you'll have one of the secrets to creating an amazing life. After that, you'll have the foundation on which to build. It's kind of like I'll supply the sample blueprint, the model, and you provide the materials, your life experiences. And together, we'll build an amazing place for you to live and grow. You'll have all the skills and training necessary to do any remodeling or maybe even add an addition or two later, at a later date if you'd like. So, what's this unplugged dog dreams all about? Well, I'm glad you asked. It, my friends, is the basis for our perceived and experienced reality. Each word stands for one of the big 3 concepts I mentioned earlier. The simple phrase, unplugged dog dreams, can be used by each of us to remind ourselves of the things that keep us from getting what we want out of life. Once we remember those things, we can change some habits and do some activities which will bring us whatever it is we want. In order to understand what I mean, I'll have to tell you 3 short stories. All 3 stories are based on 3 separate and unrelated research projects that took place in 3 separate decades. When the findings of these projects are strung together in a particular sequence, they create a picture and possible explanation as to why things are the way they are here on Earth. Ultimately, they point to an undeniable, irrefutable, possible way to look at life in the universe. And as I stated in the introduction, I do not claim to have the truth or the way. I simply provide a possible way to view this thing we call life, and it can be used as a filtering system to gain new perspectives on life. So, here it goes. Unplugged dog dreams. The first word in our phrase is unplugged. The following paragraphs will describe the first set of scientific findings that the word unplugged will represent. To understand these findings, we must first talk about something called self-talk. Each one of us has a voice inside our head that speaks to us all day, every day. I can just imagine someone who's reading this say to themselves, what are you talking about? It's that voice that just asked that question that I am specifically talking about. That voice speaks to us all the time. This inner dialogue goes on and on all day, all night, making comments, storing information, doing what it does. That voice, or that inner dialogue, is referred to in the scientific community as sub-vocalization, or self-talk. These sub-vocalization self-talks, or thought forms, are happening quite rapidly. In fact, so rapidly that we actually don't hear most of them. If I were to speak to you as fast as I could, let's say like a very fast auctioneer, your mind can think and speak to itself at least 4 times faster. That means that as each of us are listening to someone talk, like me reading right now, we are actually talking and listening to ourselves form opinions, responses about 4 times faster than they're speaking. Apparently, research indicates that during a conversation, we actually listen to ourselves more than we actually listen to the person who is talking to us. Whether we're in conversation with someone or not, the rapidity of our self-talk is astounding. My understanding is that each of us have billions of neural impulses each moment. And amongst those billions of impulses are a certain amount of a particular type of impulse that must be happening in order to determine that our brains are alive. My understanding is that one must have a minimum of about 90 of these particular brain impulses per minute, or their brain is considered dead. And you know what happens when the doctors determine your brain is dead. They unplug you. And what happens after that is a subject for a whole other book. So, 90 brain impulses per minute, that's about 1.5 impulses per second. Now, apparently these continue on and on throughout the day. And by the time 24 hours has elapsed, somewhere around a minimum of 130,000 brain impulses have occurred. Now, among these brain impulses, we have self-talk. Current research indicates that we have around 35 thought forms. 35 thought forms per minute. When extrapolated out, for a 24-hour period, it is estimated that we have around 50,000 self-talk and self-talk thought forms every day. Now, what the heck are we talking to ourselves about? This next part may blow your mind. Science has shown that of these 50,000 thought forms, roughly 80%, 40,000 of them, are negative or limiting in some way. I'll repeat that. Of 50,000 thought forms that we have every day, 80% of them, or 40,000, are negative or limiting in some way. But wait, that's not all. Of these 50,000 thought forms that automatically happen all the time, every day, like the average human being who's attending to his or her self-talk, who's really working with their self-talk, is only aware of around 5% of this dialogue. Did you get that? 5%, 0.05. The average person only interacts with around 5% of his thoughts. The other 95% just occur without our attention or our direction. They just happen. That means that of the 50,000 vocalization self-talks that occur throughout the day, we bring conscious attention to and interact with approximately 2,500. But wait, once again, that's still not all. Of these 2,500 thought forms that we actually interact with, 80% of them, or 2,000 of them, are negative or limiting in some way. So that means for each day, we have approximately 2,000 negative thoughts for every 500 positive ones. That's roughly a 4-to-1 ratio, and if you look at it in terms of a tug of war with oneself, is it any surprise who's winning? For example, I might say to myself, I'm going to write a book. My own mind responds with, you can't do that. Are you crazy? Why do you think you can do that? Do that with ease. If it was that easy, everyone would do it. Your own mind is probably wrestling with these statistics right now. Part of your thoughts want to hear this, and yet a much larger contingency is attempting to persuade you differently. All day long, we experience this internal tug of war. What really gets me is that we're only aware of and interact with approximately 5%. So in summary, 50,000 thought forms a day, 80%, 40,000 of them are negative or limiting. In some way, of these 50,000, we're aware of 5%, 2,500, of which 2,000 are negative or limiting in some way. So for every 500 positive thoughts we have 2,000 negative ones. How do we stop this thing? How do we turn it off? Where's the switch? Can't we just unplug it? Unfortunately, the answer is no. We cannot unplug it. One can unplug from it, but one cannot unplug it. I'll say that again. Once again, one can unplug from it, but one cannot unplug it. If you did unplug it, they would unplug you, which is the subject for a whole other book. And besides then, you wouldn't be able to learn how to ultimately use this information to your advantage, which, if I'm not mistaken, is the whole purpose of you reading this book. So, in review, we think and speak to ourselves through self-talk all day, every day, and our negative thoughts outweigh our positive thoughts 4-to-1. Okay, that's it. That's the first part of the big three. The word unplugged represents all of that information. Now, let's continue to the next piece of the puzzle. Unplugged dog treats. The next bit of information will be associated with the word dog and represents the second piece of our big three puzzle. Experimental psychologists are a wonderful breed, pun intended. It is through their laborious efforts that we can learn quite a bit. You may not agree with their methods, and most animal lovers won't, but at least we can take advantage of their findings. In the following example, we uncover a very important part of the big three. Some years ago, a research team built a large dog-sized maze. A metal screen was attached to the floor so that an electric current could be sent as a shock throughout the surface of the floor, and the next ingredient for this experiment was a dog. The researchers placed the dog at the beginning of the maze and proceeded to give it an electric shock through its paws. And needless to say, in response to this jolt, the pooch hightailed it through the maze, running away from where the area was where it was shocked. Over and over and over, the scientists proved to themselves that when a dog is placed at one end of a maze and given an electric shock, it will in fact run through the maze to get away from the shock. Seems reasonable on the canine's part. I mean, I do the same thing too. But what had been established was that when a dog is made uncomfortable by shocking its paws with electricity, it will run away from the place it was shocked in order to find a safer place to reside where it won't get shocked anymore. Pretty basic, huh? I mean, you know, stimuli, response. The next part of the experiment is really quite awful, and I must share it with you in order to make a very important point. Please forgive me for the ensuing imagery, yet I hope it sticks in your mind forever and provides you with an understanding of one of our predicaments as humans. What the scientists did next is they placed the dog, What the scientists did next was pretty gross. They took our little doggy and put him in a harness. Essentially, the harness was like a straitjacket and made it impossible for the dog to move. After our doggy was rendered immobile, part 2 of the experiment began. They placed the dog back in the maze and proceeded to shock its little paws over and over again and again. They repeated the shock treatment. Each time the dog attempted to run, no matter how hard it tried to escape, the harness held it to its fate. After some time, the doggy just finally gave up. It just stood there, passively receiving the shocks. No matter how many times they shocked the pooch, it no longer even tried to do anything. It just stood there. The crucial findings associated with this cruelty came in the next phase of the experiment. The scientists removed the harness from the dog and once again placed it in the maze. Following the usual procedures, they pushed the button, shot the dog. Into their amazement, it just stood there. It didn't move. I mean, they repeated the program, shock after shock and shock, and the dog just stood there passively receiving this brutal treatment. Although it was completely unbound, free to run and escape, it just stood there attempting nothing. This experiment and the dog's reaction to it came to be known as the learned helplessness phenomenon. Although the dog previously had learned to run from the shock, after being harnessed and repeatedly failing to escape, it finally just gave up. Even after being removed from the restraint, the dog was resigned to its previous harnessed reality. It was completely free to run, yet it didn't. So that's it. That's the second part of the big three. The word dog represents all of that. The word dog represents the learned helplessness phenomenon. Now, let's continue on to the next piece of the puzzle. Unplugged dog dreams. Although the first two pieces of research and the images and knowledge they convey stand alone and are significant in and of themselves, the next bit of research and the sequence of thoughts thereafter complete the entire picture of the perspective of unplugged dog dreams. In the early 70s, researchers decided they wanted to study dreams. Or more specifically, what effect dreams and their associated brainwave activities had on our everyday lives. Earlier experiments in this field have proven that we, humans, dream every night. Although we may not remember them, our minds dream each and every night. Whether we like it or not, the mind, just does this thing. So scientists now want to know, why do we dream? What purpose do dreams serve? How do dreams affect us? What happens if we don't dream? And blah, 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 blah. The question really was, what the heck's going on in there and how the heck do we do this? You see, at that time in history, scientists didn't have all the modern sophisticated equipment that they have today. So to better understand the purpose of dreaming and what effect it has on our daily lives, the researchers decided they would study the dreamless mind. In order to do this, they had to design an experiment which would deprive humans of their dream state. By observing these dreamless minds, researchers hoped to find some difference in the waking mind so they could determine what role dreams played in the construction and development of our day-to-day lives. In short, how dreams affect our awake human life. Previously, science had determined that as we begin to dream, our eyes dart side to side very rapidly, and it's known as rapid eye movement, REMs. Most of us have heard of that. With this information, the researchers and their graduate students would attempt to monitor sleeping people and wake them when their eyes began to move. The experiment began. Our human subjects agreed to sleep in the lab and be awakened each and every time the REMs began. So there they were, sleeping away. And soon after the researchers determined that the dream state had begun, they woke up the subjects, depriving them of their dream states. All night long, for many days, the sequence went like this. Sleep, REM, wake up. Sleep, REM, wake up. Sleep, REM, wake up. Oh, no. Soon after this experiment was started, it was terminated. The findings were alarming. In fact, the test was considered so dangerous and unethical that apparently no test like it has ever been conducted since. What did they find? They found that people just like you and me, people who are deprived of dreaming in their sleep become very disturbed. In fact, dream deprivation caused anxiety, irritability, frustration, and the subjects who experienced it all were very, very upset. All the subjects became uncomfortable with life. Some were contemplating suicide to end their despairs. Others became outwardly violent. All in all, when these people were not allowed to dream in their sleep, they became very unpleasant to be around. Since that time, science has advanced, and our understanding of the mind has increased enormously. We now can read brainwave activity and measure the precise wavelength of brain states. In fact, I heard of one article in a science magazine where researchers were actually weighing a thought. I mean, imagine it, weighing a thought, like a physical object. I mean, who'd have thought you could weigh your thinking? The thought of it gives a whole new meaning to the word diet. I mean, I can see it now, Overthinkers Anonymous. I could really go off on this one, but I'm going to choose to get back to the point. The point is, we scientifically know more about the human mind today than any other time in the history of man. And one of the things we now know, is that there is no difference between the brain activity in a dreaming mind while we're asleep and the brain activity of a daydreaming mind while we're awake. They are basically identical. Dreaming has the same effect on you whether you're asleep or you're awake. So what, you say? So, think about it. If you basically go nuts when you don't dream at night, wouldn't the same be true if you're not allowed your dreams and aspirations during the day? Is there anything we've already spoken about that would be depriving us of our dreams? The secret is now upon us. The meaning and significance of the big three unplugged doctrines represents the culmination of a half-century of research. The effect that is happening to us right now, even as you read this, is this. We attempt to dream a better life, a better job, a better world, and simultaneously we are instantly stopped, woken up, shaken from our dreams by the automatic negative thoughts that bombard us throughout each moment, causing us to resign ourselves to a state of learned helplessness. Once again, we attempt to dream a better life, a better job, a better world, and simultaneously we're instantly stopped. We're woken up, shaken from our dreams by the automatic negative thoughts that bombard us throughout each moment, causing us to resign ourselves to a state of learned helplessness. That's pretty heavy, isn't it? Well, please allow me to repeat this point in a different way. It seems to me that our day-to-day awake life experience is identical to that of the dream research lab. We want to change. We want to grow. We want to dream, yet we've given up before we've even allowed ourselves to consider our options. We disregard the limitless possibilities in and for our lives and resign ourselves to a state of learned helplessness because 80% of our thought forms, most of which we're not even aware of, tell us that it's useless to even ponder the possibilities. like in the lab, when the researchers were waking up their subjects to deprive them of their dreams, so too our own thoughts keep waking us up from our dreams and desires for a better life for ourselves. Our minds extinguish any positive thoughts or dreams we may have with a 400% greater effort. It thoughtlessly and unconsciously defeats itself. Realizing this really bothered me. I mean, the idea that I've been unconsciously and to an extent consciously sabotaging myself, because I have a mind that automatically thinks more negative thoughts than positive ones, and that the positive ones, I have, get diluted and canceled out, which leaves me thinking and feeling that it's useless to attempt to change my life and my surroundings, just flat out bothers me. To consider that I'm bound by an invisible set of thoughts, or even worse, thoughts about those thoughts, really troubles me. According to the dog research, I will act as though I am bound even if I'm not. Just because at some point I was. Any way you look at it, it's not good. To take this point further, look around this world. Just look at most of the people living in this world. What do you see? I see that a large percentage of this world is filled with human beings who are just like the human subjects in the Dream Research Lab. Anxious, irritable, and frustrated people who exhibit suicidal tendencies, violence towards themselves, violence towards others, towards the environment, and basically an entire species who's very uncomfortable with its existence. I hate looking at the world this way. And at the same time, this is what I see. We all see it every day. Just watch the news. With TV and movies, we actually entertain ourselves with it. Billions of dollars are spent reinforcing and driving the message home that we are victims to this and that's just the way it is. Some may see this as a very bleak situation, but take a moment and examine your own thinking right now. What's your self-talk doing? What's it saying? Is it denying or agreeing? Is it explaining or justifying? Is it frustrated or irritable? Mine is. Mine is doing all of the above and more. Positive, negative, moving back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And every time I think of the world this way, it just really bothers me. Because this just continues on every day, all day long. Yet, I feel it's good for me to have this awareness. Why? Because for so many years I've been numb. I just turned off my feelings. And as soon as I would feel uncomfortable, I'd push that feeling away and pretend I was okay. My whole life I've been pretending that I was okay. I'm strong and I can deal with it. And when I was a kid, my dad would frequently say to me, that's just the way it is, so deal with it. And the funny thing is, no one ever taught me how to deal with it. I just kind of made it up. My way was to stuff it and pretend. And the more I talk about it in public like this, the more I find literally thousands of people who say that that's what they do too. My whole life has been this internal tug of war of pretending everything is okay when deep inside I knew it isn't. I know it isn't. Now when I feel it, I use that feeling to trigger my mind to pay attention and have a good look, to understand that there is a system supporting this behavior. And that maybe, just maybe, I can do something about it. When I stumbled upon Unplugged dog dreams, when I realized the implication of the research, when I saw what was happening in my own mind, a light went on, the aha phenomenon. I saw that this was a key. This was one of the missing links, that this information could lead me to understand and unlock my potential. Swami Vivekananda once said, once you begin to know a thing, we may then have power over it. So information is power. And this information afforded me a moment's rest, a lull in the storm. This information allowed me to understand that when I'm upset or uncomfortable, I'm just stuck in a loop. And that loop is not who I am. Rather, it's just what my mind is thinking. And in fact, I'm not in a harness. I'm free. I'm free. All these years unable to move, all because of this imagined harness that's been gone for years and years. And now, no matter what anyone says, I know what's up. I'm free. Oh. It's like being in a totally unfamiliar and foreign room when all the lights are off. It's completely dark, and you can't see anything except this tiny circle from a light, from a pen-like flashlight, about an inch away from the ground. This information has allowed me to take a hold of that flashlight, lift the flashlight, and slowly raise it higher and higher, which slowly illuminates and reveals reveals more and more of the room. Suddenly, I can see more of my surroundings and begin to navigate and explore. Looking for a candle, a lamp, and ultimately a light switch so that I can save the batteries in the flashlight, in case there's another dark room someday. So, on to the light switch.